Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carruth Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1970 movie titled Kelly's Heroes. Now, Kelly's Heroes is a war comedy film which was directed by Brian Hutton, produced by Gabriel Katzka, Howard Loeb, and Sidney Beckerman. It was written by Troy Kennedy Martin, and the score was by Lalo Schifrin, and the cinematography was by Gabriel Figueroa. The running time is 2 hours and 26 minutes long. It was filmed in Vizenada, Croatia. The stars of the movie are Clint Eastwood, Telly Savalas, Don Rickles, Carroll O'Connor, Donald Sutherland, Harry Dean Stanton, Gavin McLeod, and Stuart Margolin. Now, the story goes something like this. In World War II France in 1944, the 35th Infantry Division near the town of Nancy were asked to pull out while being under attack by the German Nazis. Former Lieutenant Clint Eastwood, who's now been demoted to a private after an assault, kidnaps a German colonel who works for the German intelligence. Kelly notices a gold bar stashed in his briefcase, with which Kelly interrogates the German colonel by forcing him to consume alcohol so that he will be too drunk, as an easy way to get as much information as to how many more of those gold bars are hidden. Colonel Dankoff, that's the name of the German officer, reveals that there are 14,000 more that's actually worth up to $16 million, and that it's stored behind enemy lines in the town of Clermont. Kelly assigns the remaining platoon that includes Master Sergeant Big Joe, played by Telly Savalas, who is reluctant at first to do this, but the rest of the platoon are eager to join. There's also joining in on this Nazi treasure hunt includes Supply Sergeant Crap Game, played by Don Rickles, and a Sherman tank commander named Sergeant Oddball, played by Donald Sutherland. The chaos erupts in a German-held town as Kelly arranges a mortar barrage, but an American fighter plane gets misinformed as they think Kelly's platoon are the enemies. The plane strafes their vehicles using rockets to destroy their transportation, which leads to the platoon to travel the rest of the way by foot, while 3 members inadvertently die in a minefield. Oddball's tanks pass their way through the German territories, but the last of the large bridges gets blown up, so Oddball eventually negotiates with a bridge unit in on the deal. The radio announcements are overheard through communications office, which were led by Major General Holt, played by Carroll O'Connor, who thinks that the platoon are actually enthusiastic patriots, and eventually decides to rush to the scene to support the breakthrough. Kelly's platoon are able to reach Clermont before the army does, which is deafened by 3 Tiger tanks from the 1st USS Panzer Division with infantry support. The American troops successfully take down most of the German infantry, and 2 of their Tiger tanks, numbers 111 and 113, get blown up while chasing a Sherman tank. However, Oddball's last Sherman tank breaks down, and Tiger tank number 115 couldn't be defeated. So Kelly persuades the German tank commander a share of the loot if he could find them the remaining gold bars. The Tiger ignites a blast through the bank doors, and Kelly's platoon finds the stash of gold. After dividing the gold, they eventually go their own ways and avoid the dumbfounded General Holt, who's trampled by celebrating residents. Now, what did I think of this movie? Well, let's just say that instead of, preaching about the complications of war, I mean, it's been, milked onto us for many, many years. Kelly's Heroes instead explores the absurd nature of the war by parodying the boundaries of the war and the evils behind it. What makes Kelly's Heroes effective in viewing is that director Brian G. Hutton never went back on the sole purpose of the film to make his audience laugh. There's no preachy message here, just pure fun and entertainment. The believable nature of this movie is that it stretches the imagination in its comic nature and prevents it from being a silly story. Sure, the story is off the wall, but the possibility of what happened in the story could have happened due to the complicated nature of the war. Now, those who served time in the war may speak from experience that they had met someone very similar to the characters portrayed here. Even Sergeant Oddball, played by Donald Sutherland. I agree that Sutherland seems to be out of place at the setting of the film, but he still captures the essence of the rebellious type, regardless of what war is taking place. Because you see, Oddball, he does look out of place. I mean, with the long hair, the thick beard, he looks more like Vietnam War as opposed to World War II, where everybody was all immaculately shaven with short hair or even bald. And for a World War II film, he does kind of look out of place physically, but I think that's what it was meant to be. And maybe the movie was not just aimed towards World War II, even though this was a World War II based movie. But in 1970, when the movie was released, the Vietnam War was going on, so I guess Mr. Hutton decided to put a Vietnam War-esque individual like Oddball into the fray, just to also prove his point, and maybe even to rub the evils of war to President Nixon's face. And maybe Oddball's motives were designed to give us an interpretation of the Vietnam War, which is in full effect at the time. If that is the case, then Sergeant Oddball character works cohesively then with the other characters, and he does not look like a colored fish in a gray tank. For good measure, Hutton utilizes his resources wisely in making sure that the technicality was handled accurately. The costume uniforms were proven authentic, and the vehicles and props that the soldiers and the Nazis used matched the time period of the film. The cinematography looks and feels as though as if you're in World War II. Instead of, like kicking Nazi butt, but there are action scenes. But this movie is just about, a bunch of platoons breaking into a Nazi-occupied territory to retrieve 14,000 gold bars worth up to $16 million. The platoon scene where a convoy of Sherman tanks were passing by. Though maybe there was few of them, the special effects here looked as though there were approximately 1,000 tanks passing by. The Yugoslavian location is a good backdrop, giving it that sense that you're in the middle of the action. And yes, there were concentration camps in Yugoslavia, and Yugoslavia itself was a war zone at the period of time, so the location choice by Hutton and the cinematographer was purely authentic. Watch the film many times and you get a glimpse of the nuances that you may have missed out the first time through. The unimportant events early on in the movie actually advance the humor content later on as the film progresses. For example, when Oddball shows Kelly one of the tanks that he claims has loudspeakers and painted shells inside designed to fool the Nazis, the reality is that early Sherman tanks were at a low velocity that was proven not strong enough against the more advanced weaponry that the Germans possessed. Also look at the scene where Kelly catches a Tiger tank by the rear. Then Oddball inadvertently forgets to fire an anti-tank round and splatters pink paint on it. That was definitely the funniest scene. But however, the best scene was when Oddball's crew were under attack at a railroad yard, and while the crew was destroying the place, they began to sing along to the tune, "I've been working on the railroad." It was brilliantly choreographed and accurate to near perfection. Performance-wise, let me just say, Clint Eastwood was definitely at his A-game here. Even though I know this was a comedy film, you could see the straight face in him. He still managed to succeed in having that intensity, like he wasn't in a comedy, but an actual war epic. Telly Savalas was also very believable as the Master Sergeant, who's got a very tough exterior, but a fair heart of gold inside. And even though he seems a bit reluctant, he definitely captures, the believability of what a real sergeant would react when they're in on what is to be a nonsensical mission, when yet there are a lot of other serious matters in World War II than just going into Nazi territory and try to go on what is to be like a little treasure hunt to look for gold bars. That's what it felt like to me, like a World War II treasure hunt. Nothing more. I mean, it wasn't about patriotism or kicking Nazi ass. That's what it was, a treasure hunt. But Telly Savalas still makes his role very, very believable. It was actually a shame that Don Rickles was deprived of an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for his role as Sergeant Krapke. He seemed to coagulate with the characters and is actually more believable than most of the other cast members. Of course, you know that many of the cast members in this movie, of course, went on to become TV sitcom stars, including Carroll O'Connor, who played the role of General Holt, of course. He later, of course, became the most iconic bigot in television history, Archie Bunker. We have Telly Savalas, who went on to play Kojak in the TV series Kojak, and Gavin McLeod, who played the pessimistic, always negative, opposite, odd couple relationship between he and Oddball Moriarty. Of course, he went on to play different characters, including TV series like McHale's Navy, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, and The Love Boat. He is definitely very effective in his small supporting role. The hilarious take on the good, the bad, and the ugly was extremely funny. Just like, Sergeant Oddball, who looked out of time period, but he was still effective in his own merit. Clint Eastwood was distraught that the film needed more editing to make his film better, but I don't agree with him on that. I think this was genuinely a great movie. I don't know, what was the editing mean? To make it longer? Because I would not agree with him if he wanted to make it longer. It was already ran for 2 hours and 26 minutes, and I think that's enough. But then again, maybe it's just Clint Eastwood being his own worst enemy, like what people feel at times. But the reality is there's no need to look further. I mean, it was plausible enough already. So I think that kind of ends our writer review. If I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, definitely I would give it a 9.5. I mean, it was really that good. If you're into war movies or parodying the war, this one, along with MASH, is quite something to add to the collection. And I guess if you're a Donald Sutherland fan, you'll be in for a treat because he's in both. The only difference between Kelly's Heroes and MASH is that MASH is sort of like portraying surgeons in the army who don't necessarily have to go to war, but are out to heal the wounds. And of course, you know, MASH is about the Korean War, and Kelly's Heroes is about World War II. And Kelly's Heroes is, you know, dealing with a platoon of military grunts looking for Nazi gold. Well, I hope you, like I said, I hope you enjoyed this review. And please, you know, write to me as soon as possible. Remember, be kind, be courteous, and I'll be back again with another review as soon as possible. Thank you very much, and have a good evening, everyone. I'll see you around.